So currently I'm working on a big project for no one less than Myquartz, the maker of the world famous Syberia adventure series. And this is a huge project that required us to rewrite several parts of Cattitude to speed up things a bit. But more about Cattitude later. First, I would like to tell you a bit more about this wonderful game. It follows two timelines with two characters. Dana Rose, a young pianist in the small fictional Central European country of Ostetal, resembling a mix of Austria and the Czech Republic in the 1930s, and Kate Walker, the protagonist of the Syberia series, who is now imprisoned in a salt mine in the fictional Eastern European region of Taiga in the early 2000s. Dana graduates from her conservatory by performing the local anthem dedicated to the city of Wagen, where the fascist Brown Shadow faction, which is basically an analog to the National Socialists, have begun to persecute the ethnic minorities, forcing them into ghettos. And that's where the adventure begins. Okay, so these files are really big. How big, I hear you ask? Well, there's about 82,000 words spread over 4 huge Excel files. And in total, there are like 18,000 lines, segments really, whereby one segment is a short spoken dialogue by a character. And for each segment, we need to remember 15 things. We need to remember the source text with tags, that is programming codes, you know, making letters bold or italic, stuff like that, or code triggering certain animations in the game. Then there's the current translation that still needs proofreading. Then there's the proofread translation, if the translation has already been proofread. Then there's the pure untouched source text. We also need this. There's the string ID, which can give us more information about context. There is the context itself, you know, for example, speaker information, speaker gender information, speaker age information, etc. There is the character limits, because some dialogues, you know, in some cases, the screen earner space is limited, so we need to fit our translation within a certain character limit in a certain space. There's the locked status. Does a certain segment actually need translation? Yes or no? Should we just lock it for context? And then there's the client name, the file name, the number of the segment in the file, the name of the translator who translated the segment. There's the pending status for segments we're not sure about yet. Then there's the cell color, because the color of cells in Excel can also give us certain information. And there's the file segment number, the number of the cell within a certain file, which can be different from the number of the segment in the total of 4 files. This means that every time you open the project, Cattitude needs to import 270,000 cells. And that takes a very long time. Actually, it takes 7.5 minutes to be very precise. So it became clear very soon that we had to change something in Cattitude, because when it comes to importing files, there are basically 2 strategies. Strategy 1 is that every time you open the project, you re-import the files. You read the information directly from the files. This has one huge advantage. It gives you much more control over the contents of the file. For example, you can change import settings on the fly. A prime example of this are so-called regec tags. And we use these to hide information we don't want translators to touch. For example, think HTML codes and the like. These should be put on the right place in the text, but we don't want the translators to actually touch these. And by using tags, we can also prevent code soup, you know, lots of tags between all the words, which makes translation for translators really difficult to accomplish. The disadvantage of this method is that re-importing files can take a lot of time if the files are huge. And in this case, 7.5 minutes, which is really extreme. Then there's a second strategy, which is the strategy used by, as far as I know, all CAT tools in the world, except Cattitude. You import the files once, and then you send them to a separate cache, basically a separate piece of your database, in which you order the information so that next time you read it directly from the cache, you can read it much faster. The disadvantage of this method is that you can't make changes on the fly. You can't change your import settings once the files have been imported. If you go to another tool and you change certain regex tags, in most cases you cannot undo these changes. To undo the changes, you actually have to re-import all files again. So, but by using this cache, which we implemented, how much time did we save? Well, as you can see here, if we import information straight from the files to Cattitude, it takes 7.5 minutes. If we import the same information to our newly built cache, it still takes 7.5 minutes. But once the information is in the cache, we can import all these 270,000 cells at once in 29 seconds to be precise. So, Cattitude can now offer the best of both worlds. When tags are added, it automatically re-imports all the files, and then you have to wait for 7.5 minutes. But in all other cases, it just uses the cache, speeding up the process and making it more than 14 times as fast. And now we have this cache to work with. We can also do things that were previously not possible. For example, we can sort segments by alphabet, or we can sort them on segment length or last date modified or segment status. In other tools, this is possible already, but it's always slow when you have to re-import big files. And Cattitude now offers both possibilities, at least for Excel files, and we can later extend this to other file formats too, like Word files. So Cattitude is fast when it can be fast, but it takes its time when it needs to take its time. And this way, we offer the best of both worlds. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you in the next episode of Cattitude. Goodbye.